So I'm going to share you tonight what I shared on that night. Now let's remind ourselves, what is it we're saying? Claims about the Quran. Muslims claim it is eternal. Muslims claim it was sent down. Muslims claim it was complete at the time of Uthman. And Muslims claim it is unchanged. All you need is ask those 4 questions to any Muslim at any time. Just need to remember those 4 words. Eternal, sent down, complete, unchanged. Well, that's 5 words. Okay, so I don't know my math. But if you could just remember those 4 demands. Eternal, sent down, complete, unchanged. My question is, prove it. Prove those 4. Which means I know you can't prove eternality, so I'm not going to ask you to prove eternality, any Muslim sitting here tonight. You can't prove sent down because we weren't there. All I'm asking any Muslim here tonight is, show me a complete manuscript of the Quran from the time of Uthman, that's the mid-7th century, which is complete and unchanged. That's all I'm asking. And that's what I asked Dr. Shabir Ali in 2014. And he still has not answered me. He cannot. No matter how good a debater he is, there is no way that any Muslim can answer those 3 questions. A complete Quran, written in the 7th century, that's unchanged. I'm not asking much. I'm not asking for 9 manuscripts, I'm asking for 1. Though 9 were made, where are those 9 manuscripts? Where is the manuscript that was sent to Baghdad, Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Aden, Hedab, and Nishabur? That's all I'm asking. If you could just give me 1 manuscript from those 9 cities that is complete and unchanged, I will be happy. All right? And for those who are watching this on YouTube, this is for all Muslims all over the world. Shabir Ali has not been able to do so. So I'm asking other Muslims to do so. Now, there are many translations. We're not talking about the translations. 106 English translations alone. But what are the claims that Muslims make? So let's look at some of the experts, some of those who, well, not everybody may call them experts. Men like Fethullah Gulen from Turkey, who says there is only 1 Quran. Men like, or a lady like Suzanne Hanif, who said it is preserved in its original form. Or Jamal al-Din Mzara Bozo, who said every Quran is the same throughout the world. The famous translator for the Quran, Abdullah Yusuf Ali from Pakistan, says not a single letter has been changed. That's quite a statement to me. Not a single letter of the Quran has been changed. Zaid ibn Sultan al-Nahyan Foundation says not even a dot has been changed. Not even a dot has been changed. Maulvi Muhammad Ali from your area, he's one of your men, says not even a diacritical point has been changed. Not even a diacritical point has been changed. Al-Hajj A.D. Ajijola says not a jot or tittle. They have put the Quran so high, can you see the claims they're making? Yet there's not 1 Muslim that can support any of these claims, and we'll show you why. Now, my good friend Dr. Shabir Ali, I've debated him 6 times, excuse me. The last time was in 2014. I doubt he's going to debate me again because of what happened in 2014. Over 500,000 people have watched that debate. We know tens of people, Muslims, who have given their life to Jesus Christ because of that one debate. It is a debate that's difficult to watch if you're a Muslim. But Dr. Shabir Ali, even at that debate, I gave these 2 quotes. When he was debating Tony Costa a number of years ago, he pointed out that we Muslims have the copy of the Quran dating for 790, that's 790 AD in the British Museum. That's called the Ma'il Codex, which is known as the MS-2165 Codex. Folks, that's 1,300 years ago, Shabir said. And we can compare that with what we're reading today, and we find them to be exactly identical. So before the debate, Shabir used to say this. The Ma'il Quran, the 2165 manuscript, is exactly the same as the Quran we have today. He goes on, the text of the Quran, because the text was known through memory work and through the written materials handed down right from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, as I said, Shabir goes on, the 2 copies that were made 1,400 years ago, one which is in Tashkent, so he's talking about the Sammerqand manuscript, which is in Tashkent, and he's talking about the Ma'il Quran, which is in London at the British Library. These are early copies from that time, and we find no difference from that copy to what we're reading today. So even the best debater in the Muslim world is willing to say that the Ma'il and the Sammerqand are exactly the same as the Quran we have today. So let's look at these manuscripts. Now, for many years, for 35 years that I've been working in Islam, I could not look at these manuscripts. We did not have access to these manuscripts. Muslims do not give us access to their manuscripts. We give them access to all our biblical manuscripts. There is no restriction on the biblical manuscripts, and most of them are up online. You can go look at the Sinaiticus in its entirety, the Alexandrinus in its entirety. You can look at the Vaticanus in its entirety. You can go look at every one of the fragments that are in the Chester Beatty Museum. You can look at the Bodmer Papyrus. You can look at the John Rylands manuscript. All of these manuscripts and fragments are all available for public scrutiny. We do not hide a thing. There is no reason to hide it. We have been completely transparent. That's why Muslims are able to confront us on it, because we give them everything to confront with. Why have Muslims not allowed us to look at these manuscripts? Until 2002. In 2002, two scholars. Now, before we get into this, let's just look and see, remind ourselves what the claim is. According to Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, 509, Uthman collected the Quran. Abu Bakr first collected the Quran, and then Uthman collected a second recension in 652. Took all the manuscripts that disagreed with it, burned them, and then sent a copy to 9 different cities. Just to remind ourselves, let's look at a map. Look at the 9 provinces. Look where they are. Basra, Baghdad, where you can see them all here. I don't know if this will work. Sorry, I'm pushing the wrong button again. Here's Basra, there's Baghdad, there's Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Aden down here. Then you have Herat there and Nishapur up there. Okay, so those are all the 9 different provinces right there, all in that brown area. Oh, I just pushed the wrong button again. All in this brown area here. That's the time that we're looking at. All right? That's the time of Uthman. Those within the province that would be under his jurisdiction. According to Arthur Jeffrey has been a scholar in the last century, in the 1930s. He went to all the Islamic traditions. So he went to the Siratul Rasulullah, he went to the Hadith, he went to the Tafsir, he went to the Taqi, he went to the 4 genres of what we know as the Islamic traditions. And he looked at their claims of what they said concerning the original Quran. And what he found out is there were a multiplicity of Qurans, but there were 4 metropolitan codices that were specifically attributed. One is attributed to Ubay ibn Ka'b and from Damascus. What was interesting, there were 115 chapters in his Quran, yet there's only 114 in the Quran today. There was another Quran that was attributed to Ibn Masud in Kufa. He had 111 chapters. He was missing 3 chapters in his Quran according to the traditions. Another one by Ibn Musa in Basra had 116 chapters. And then Zayd ibn Thabit was the one that had his in Medina. His was 114. Now this is known back since the 1930s. We've known about this for almost 100 years. This is not new material that I'm teaching you right now. And Muslims also know about this. But we really wanted to look at the Topkapi and the Sammerqand, because these are the ones that Shabit Ali specifically looked at. But we can go one step better, because we now have had access to the 6 major manuscripts, the 6 major mushafs that Muslims claim were all from the time of Uthman. Here are 3 of them. The Topkapi, which is in Istanbul, there in Turkey. The Sammerqand, which is in Tashkent, in Uzbekistan. The Ma'il, which is in the which is the British Museum, British Library, in London. The 2165. The Husseini manuscript, which is in Cairo, in Egypt. The Petropolitanus manuscript, also known as the BNF, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, so it's in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. And then, most important, probably the most exciting one, is the Sana'a manuscript, which is discovered in 1975, which is in Sana'a in Yemen. So those are the 6 manuscripts: the Topkapi, the Sammerqand, the Ma'il, the Husseini, the Petropolitanus, and the Sana'a manuscripts. Now, we have only had access to the Petropolitanus and also the Ma'il because they are in London and in Paris. The other 4 we had not access. No one could get access to. No non-Muslim could get access to. And then in 2002, 2 gentlemen, 2 Turkish scholars, Professor Dr. Ekmeluddin İnsanoglu and Dr. Tayyip Atakılıç, were given access to all 6 of these manuscripts. They were given it for 5 years. So from 2002 to 2007, they were able to look at all 5 of these manuscripts. They were the first ones to do so. They are considered to be the leading scholars in the Muslim world on Arabic script, on Arabic codices or codexes. This is a codex, a book. Especially Dr. Tahir al-Tukulich. They are the ones that had access, have always had access to the Topkapi, the most important, considered to be the most important by scholars today. What did they find? They came out with their finds in 2009. They finally, it was written in, translated into English in 2013. That's why I was given access to their material, and that's why I challenged Shabit Ali to a debate. Because now we finally have access to these 6 manuscripts. These are the earliest manuscripts. These are supposedly complete manuscripts, but these are mushafs. These aren't just fragments, these are mushafs. What do they say? First and foremost, admitted in Islam, we said we have no Uthmanic mushafs. None of them are Uthmanic. Nor do we have any copies from those mushafs. These mushafs date from the later Umayyad period. That's from 661 up until 749. The later Umayyad period. That means the 8th century, not the 7th century. Dr. Tahir al-Tukulich, leading scholar of Quranic studies, ex-president of the Turkish Religious Affairs, deputy in the Turkish parliament, said there has been no serious scholarly work done on any of these manuscripts. These mushafs date from the early to mid-8th century. Let me repeat that. Early to mid-8th century. None of them are from the 7th century. They are not Uthmanic, nor even copies sent by him. Let's take a look at each one by one. The Topkapi manuscript, from early to mid-8th century. There are different pictures of it. We now have access to this. In fact, I have it in our library. We have it in our library now. You can now get the Musaf al-Sharif. It costs £400. It's very expensive, but you get the entire manuscript now. We now have access to every page of it. The introduction is in English. You only need to read it. It's only 83 pages long. If any of you do want to get it, you can get it. It's on my computer right over there. I can give it to you even tonight. Al-Tukulich dates the Topkapi manuscript to the second half of the 1st century AH, that's after Hijrah. So therefore, it is the early to mid-8th century. All right? Not the 7th century. It was neither the private Musaf of Caliph Uthman, nor one of the Musafs he sent to various centers. There are deviations from grammatical rules and spelling mistakes in the Musafs attributed to Caliph Uthman. He concludes that there are 2,270 instances where there's a difference from the consonantal skeleton of the thought text, that's the canonical text that we use today. It has 2,270 differences. And yet it comes from the mid-8th century. That's about 100 years after Muhammad. Therefore, you cannot use it at all. It is not the Uthmanic text, and it comes from 75 to 100 years after Uthman, and yet it has 2,270 manuscript variants. There are difference after difference with the 1924 text, which is the canonical text we're using today, like in Surah 14, Ayah 38. Completely different when you look at the context. Surah 3, Ayah 158. I'm not going to go through all 2,270 because we'd be here all night. What about the Sammerqand manuscript? This is the one that's probably the more famous. It's the one that was brought to London a few years ago to represent the greatest of all manuscripts for the Quran. It was brought to the British Library, and I went to see it. And you can see it's a very large text. It's what we call a monumental text. It has been dated by both Al-Tukulich and Ihsan to the early to mid-8th century again. Now, what's fascinating, Al-Tukulich says it is not Uthmanic, as it dates from the mid-8th century, and the 6 reasons that he says are problems with it. It has undisciplined spelling, it has different writing styles, it has scribal mistakes, it has copyist mistakes, it was written by someone with little experience, with later editions, and it only goes up to Surah 43. There's 114 surahs in the Quran. It wasn't even complete. Now, even when you look at those 43 surahs, of what existed in it. Take a look at them and you will see there is only one complete surah amongst the 43. 24 of them are partial, 18 have nothing in them. They're completely blank. So why haven't Muslims told us this? They've had this manuscript for 1,300 years. Why in 1,300 years did we have to wait until 2013 finally to find out how hopeless a Quran it is? In fact, Al-Tukulich says it's an embarrassment because of its terrible grammar that it uses. The differences between the Topkapi and the Sammerqand you can see over and over again. These are just examples. If you want to study these more, those of you who want the PowerPoint, take a look and just see how different they are just between the two copies. So they don't even agree with each other. These are two manuscripts from the 8th century that don't even agree with each other, and neither of them are complete. The model Koran that we have in London, we have known about. This 2165 Quran, it also only goes up to Surah 43. 53% of the Quran is missing. It is dated to the late 8th century or early 8th century. Now that one is full of manuscript variants. We've already known about that. The Al-Huzayni manuscript is early to mid 8th century, dated by Al-Taqaluch. He says this is not Uthmanic. It is dated from the early to mid 8th century. This copy is not one of the Muslims attributed to the Caliph Uthman. In fact, Francois de Roche, who is the European scholar, considered to be the world's authority on the earliest manuscripts, he dates this manuscript to the 9th century, not to the 8th century, because of the fact that it used a monumental form. That was borrowed from the Christian manuscripts in the late 8th century to the early 9th century. Note, if you look carefully, the coverings on the text. You see the coverings there. There's a covering there. There's a covering there. There's a covering. We're going to talk about that. Over and over again, you see these coverings on this text. There's a covering there. They're covering words. They're covering up things. They don't want you to read part of the text. Then we get to the Paris Metropolitanist, which is also known as the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, from the Bibliothèque Nationale. This is the early 8th century. This is the one that has been worked over by Francois de Roche. Dr. Francois de Roche, he has authority over this manuscript. He has already said very clearly that there are corrections to the text. It disagrees with the Cairene Musaf in 93 places. The Cairene Musaf means the Musaf that we use today, the 1924. In 5 different copies who wrote it, had later modifications with erasures and additions. The largest section of this Metropolitanist manuscript is only concludes 26% of the Quran. Most of the Quran is missing. And yet Muslims have said it's complete. And that there's no difference between this manuscript and the Quran we have today. Why haven't they told us the truth? When you look at the Metropolitanist with the 1924, you will see a place, an area, verse after verse. We don't have time to go through all of them. And then we get to the Song manuscript. And this is probably one of the most exciting ones because it's the most recent that was discovered. It is also the earliest dated of all the manuscripts. It is dated to the early 8th century. Because of the fact it didn't have any diacritical marks, nor did it have any vowelization, German scholars were flown down in 1981 to look at it. And they were given access, they took pictures of it, those pictures of them were confiscated by the Yemeni government. They were only released to them in 1997. I got to know Gerd Quinn, Dr. Gerd Quinn, and I went to see him in Germany. And he let me take a picture of some of those folios. But what was interesting, when you look at it, you will see that parts of it also have these tapings. Look how tapings. Now, you might say, well, maybe there's something's damaged there. But when you look at the backside, you will find there's no damage whatsoever. These are intentional tapings. You can't probably see all this, but these are all the different folios within the Sana manuscript. And you can see only 22% of the Quran is in that folio. This one only has about 25% of the Quran. None of these are complete. This one only goes up 1 to 29 folios. Here 11 surahs are changeovers. You can see an enormous amount of manipulation of the text. Over 1,000 manuscript variants were counted by Gerd Quinn when I visited him. And when he let me take a picture of it, he said, take a look here. Here's Surah 19, and then it jumps to Surah 22 at that yellow mark. What happened to Surah 20 and 21? Well, suddenly Surah 20 appears on the opposite side of the page. But if you look carefully, you will see these are 2 completely different scripts. That is 705. This is the late 8th century. There's about 60 to 70 years between those 2 pages. Every time you see these orange marks, every one of those orange marks are what we call manuscript variants. That means words or phrases in this text that are not the same as the Quran we have in our hand today. And he said there were roughly around 1,000 at that time. Now, the differences in meaning are theological in some cases. But what's fascinating is that it has an undertext. See, when you use parchment or vellum, animal skins, many times in the old days, they would write and then they would wash it off and write over top. And that's called a palimpsest. That was quite common, especially if it was a manuscript that was not that important, if it was a school text or things like that. In this case, you could tell it was a there was a lower text. You can see it visually because it's bled through over the years. And what they did is they put it under ultraviolet light and they were able to separate the text. Now, just a month ago, Asma Hilali has finally come out with the undertext. Here's the book. It's only a week old. I've only had it for 1 week. She has finally now exposed what is in this text. There are hundreds of differences between the lower text and the upper text. They are not the same text. You can see that there are so many differences. Now, what she has said, the lower text is probably 50 years older than the upper text. The upper text would be 705, which would put this around to the time of Uthman. It would be about the time of Uthman, the lower text. The problem is it disagrees with the upper text. It's not the same text. It jumps all over the place. Much is missing. That's just come out in the last month. Now what she says, and she didn't know what to do, so she calls it, she says, the lower text is nothing more than a student's notes. A student's notes. Isn't it interesting? This may prove to be the oldest Quran in existence. And yet it's nothing more than students' notes. So where is the original from which the notes were taken? Why is it only the notes have lasted for 1400 years and no original has been retained for 1400 years? Could there be a reason for that? Is it that this is not a student's notes, but this is a nascent Quran? The undertext is a nascent Quran from which other Qurans have been changed and manipulated later on. Because when you look at the two texts, you can see over and over again. They did this in Australia. I get this from Dr. Perny Powers. This is his material, showing how in Surah 9, Ayah 73, how the lower and the upper text change with each other. Here you have Surah 9, Ayah 76, where every time you see pig is the lower text, when you see the yellow and the green, it disagrees with the upper text. Here you can see Surah 9, Ayah 80, so we'll continue in Surah 9. The lower text is missing almost the entire verse, though it's there in the upper text. When was that added? Why was it added? Why wasn't it there in the earlier text, the lower text? When you look at the Sana manuscript, the upper text with the 1924, you can see over and over again, even the upper text doesn't agree with the Sana, the 1924 that we have today. There you can see it in Surah 2, Ayah 2201. There how the differences are. There you can see in Surah 63, Ayah 7. Because of time, I'm not going to look at the significance of what this, how this changes the theology of the verse. Significance of what we have found? None of the 6 earliest manuscripts are from the 7th century. None of them are complete. None of them agree completely with each other, and none of these 6 manuscripts agree completely with the 1924 canonical Oudste text that we have in our hand today. Thus, this again proves there has been intentional human interventions even within the 1st century. Now let's go then to corrections.